And a good Thursday afternoon. Roger Hill of Wuthering Heights, VELCO Weather Hazards Forecaster. Looking at the at large here, the country, the lower 48, North America, the Atlantic, and the Pacific. You can see that the Pacific and western parts of the Atlantic Ocean right now, not a whole lot going on. It's pretty quiet, tropical-wise, in the Pacific as well. A lot of cloud cover, though. And we're seeing a nice little skinny ridge of higher pressure bringing us a beautiful, beautiful Thursday afternoon. We're going to see a little bit of a creep of higher clouds later on, eventually lowering and thickening. And that's going to set up a couple different bands of showers. The first band of showers works through moderately. It looks like after midnight tonight. And then it begins to push away, it looks like during the early morning hours tomorrow. And then a little bit of a lull followed by a second band. And that will be associated with the actual cold front. This frontal boundary will then whip on through. It may even provide maybe a couple spots where we might even see an isolated rumble of thunder. Not going to include it as a thunderstorm. It looks too weak and fairly limited. But that, if it's going to happen, it's going to be basically late in the afternoon on Friday. And then that cold front means business in terms of falling temperatures. We're going to see much cooler weather work in for the middle part of the weekend, I should say, into the middle part of next week before a little bit of moderation kicks in, and potentially another area of higher pressure building in for the last half of next week. Let's take a look at the computer modeling. And we have the European model on the left, the GEM or Canadian model on the right. Both of these are deterministic models, meaning they're not ensembles. So we have this ridge of higher pressure bringing us some pretty decent weather up and down the eastern seaboard right now ahead of this next shortwave. And notice that we have air cold enough to support snow, these blue lines, these thicknesses. That's 5,400 meter decameters, and anything north of that line is cold enough for snow. But we're talking this time of year, basically mountaintop. So as I run the computer model, this is valid about 8 o'clock this evening. And then we get into this first band of rain showers that kind of develops. You can see just the makings of it here in the Canadian model. And it works into Vermont during after midnight. And then kind of a lull in the morning hours on Friday, and then right back into the second round as this area of low pressure will swing that frontal system through, and it'll also drive in slightly cooler air aloft. Eventually that'll filter into the region, but most of the time this is going to be after the precipitation had already occurred and pushed away. So drying out. There is some indications, this is valid about 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, that we might see a couple spotty areas there with a little higher bit of moisture, maybe a sprinkle or something. But for the most part, that dries up. And this slight ridge of higher pressure will kind of continue to control Saturday. So we are looking at a dry weather day on Saturday. And but a fair amount of clouds. That's going to be the deal. Now we get into Sunday, we'll see this next weather system kind of push in, wrapping around this area of low pressure well up into the Canadian Maritimes. This is cold enough to see a little bit of wet snowflake action in our higher mountains. Places like Jay Peak, maybe some of the Northeast Kingdom Highlands, maybe down to Smuggler's Notch, Bolton potentially, maybe Lincoln Peak. That's going to be about it, I think, for the most part, because we are looking at some cold weather in conjunction with some light precipitation. So maybe a little skiff of snow in the upper mountains this weekend. Beyond that, that dries out. We get a little bit of a high pressure system that builds in on Monday and into Tuesday, but notice there's a little bit of this lake effect moisture cutting across, so I'm leaving this Monday as a day that may actually include some precipitation, but boy, that could go 50-50. Right now we're on kind of fence line, but some very cool weather through the weekend into the early to mid part of next week. High pressure on Tuesday should afford a beautiful day, and this area of higher pressure will kind of hold out, kind of like the last one. We're looking at a string of days going into Thursday. But by Thursday evening, we got some weather coming in. This is beyond the outlook period. So this is a very vigorous trough of lower pressure. You can see that there's some indications that it might be trying to start to cut off aloft. And if that happens with that kind of a situation, well, we might see some wet snow. So something to watch about. This is 210 hours out, valid 2 o'clock Friday afternoon, the 14th of October. And it looks like that weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the 15th, 16th, we might see some wet snowflakes in the mountains, and maybe some of that may even get down to the valley floors. We'll have to wait and see. If this is a cutoff low and it's fairly vigorous, that's a possibility. Still a little bit early for that to be anything major at this point in time, but something around the corner we'll have to keep a close eye on. And the GFS ensemble kind of indicates the center grid on Montpelier, Vermont. Kind of indicates the same kind of thing, just little scanty showers of mostly rain and another situation here and so on and so forth. We're not looking at very much QPF this period. It's a very dry kind of outlook, again below normal. Near normal in a couple spots across the northern tier for precipitation, but in general we're looking at around 0.2 of an inch, worst case scenario 0.4 of an inch for the entire period. Checking 850 temperatures aloft. This is where that cold front comes in, and we will see air cold enough that if it's in conjunction with precipitation, it would be in the form of snow before it warms up yet again. Now looking at the wind, not really looking at too bad a wind here either. Generally under 40 knots, and that's what we worry about for high winds. And again, this is about the top of Mount Mansfield, or 850 millibars. Checking precipitation type. I don't believe snow is going to show up here. Nope, not at this time. It's close to the mountaintops, but yeah, no snow to be indicated here so far. Here's the next 7 days of QPF, or accumulated precipitation. We're only talking, this is 100th. That's dry here in southern parts of New England. 0.25 of an inch. That's it across the northern tier from the Adirondacks north, and that covers that frontal boundary for tomorrow, as well as what might fall later on Sunday into Monday. Today we're well above normal in temperature, in the 70s, but that won't take long before that gets replaced by the time we get into certainly this coming weekend. Friday we'll see a day that'll lower those temperatures a little bit and still above normal though. So a warm Thursday graduates into still semi-warm on Friday, but beyond that point we really lower the temperature, and that gives us kind of neutral weighted temperatures over the next 5 days of the meteorological output statistics. 3 days later it looks like this. We cool it down, running about 3 degrees below normal. In the tropics, it's getting a little bit more active. We have one system here, about an 80% chance. Now this is a system that's heading for Nicaragua, just about due west to east, but it is a fairly low latitude track just off the coast of Venezuela, and could affect places like Aruba and some of the islands that typically don't see tropical cyclones like that. So a very low latitude tropical cyclone headed westbound into central parts of Central America. However, eastern North America, no worries this period. This is tropical depression number 12. This will be something that will be working its way very gradual. Looking at the European ensemble in the tropics, tropical cyclones, this is our system here, and you can see where it takes a track into Nicaragua, comes off the coast. It could become a Pacific storm thereafter, and it looks like it heats up 40 to 50 knots. So once it makes that land crossing into the Pacific, things are going to start to become a little bit more robust. Otherwise, the second track across the Yucatan looks like a pretty much limited chance to get going. Enjoy the day. Roger Hill, Wuthering Heights.